Thank you very much. First of the two confessions. First of all, I'm not African, and I'm also not from meat. My background is in fresh produce, but having spent 20 years defending water, sustainability, child labour, gender, and all of the issues which have come up today, I was invited by Meatco to work with them 2 years ago to look at going into the European market based entirely on these issues. So this is our 10-minute kind of overview on this one. Namibia and Meatco, state of the industry. I'm going to run through this really quickly because I only have 10 minutes. But we're just going to take a look at how Africa sees the global market. You saw the notes from Jerry on where the market is. We're going to look at it from an African perspective, how a small player like Africa can sort of find a little niche in this market. Africa's got about 230 million cattle, but they're like walking dollar bills. This is the wealth of the nation. Farmers hold cattle as their money. They use it for wedding gifts. They use it to display to their friends how rich they are. So there's 230 million cattle out there in a massively informal system. Most of this cattle is managed by pastoralists. It's mobile cattle. It wanders around. It's not fenced. We actually don't know where most of it is. Only Namibia and Botswana can export to the European Union. They have a formalized system. It's approved by the European Union. They actually do export. South Africa's got about 14 million cattle, but due to disputes over hormones and vaccines, they can't export into the EU. And just to give you some idea, we saw a 19% rise from Jerry's slides earlier on the African population. Uganda now have 11.4 million animals. 2 years ago, it was 5.6, massive rises in population numbers. And if we are going to address environmental issues caused by cattle, somehow we have to include Africa in these conversations. Otherwise, 10 years from now, we're going to be saying, what are we going to do about these guys? So somehow, although they're outside of the commercial loop, we have to include them in the conversation. Just a quick bit on Namibia. We have 2 million people, 2 million cattle. It's the second least densely populated country on the planet, Mongolia being the least dense. It's about the size of Texas, and you can pick all this stuff up from the web a bit later on. I'm not going to bother you too much with it. But Meatco is the major exporter of meat into the European Union. It operates north and south in Namibia. The south can export, the north can't. The Meatco cattle are produced naturally. It's an open rangeland system. There's no feedlots. There's no hormones or antibiotics. It's fully traceable. There's a system called fan meat, which is recognized by the European Union as a fully traceable system. So although this is Africa, this is essentially a European culture operating in Africa. Namibia was effectively a German colony, and it's got a very Germanic, very recognized way of going about things. 2 Meatco plants working, both British Retail Consortium managed and approved. It's a good system. These are the Rabobank statistics, which sort of echo really what Jerry was saying a bit earlier. Global demand goes up. 3 companies control the market. It's all on this side of the planet. Meatco, we get through 120,000 animals a year, and Botswana are getting through about 150,000. So our total output is only 250,000. You know, a good plant can get through 90,000 on this side of the world. So we are such small players in the commercial game, but we still have this 220 odd million animals wandering around the place. So at some point, we've got to bring the unregulated into a regulated market to interact with the people in this room. We've done this stuff before, but this is how we see the world. We just see the big flags, the big companies pushing out across the world, and we wonder how Namibia can make a mark in this market. We've seen this one as well. European Union demand is going to go up. We need to supply into that market. But how do we get European people to understand that African meat is safe and a really sensible thing to do? That's why I was brought in 2 years ago. We managed to actually establish an ethical fair beef label, working with people like Solidaridad, WWF, consulting them at every step of the way, actually bringing together almost a forum that we have in this room. 2 years ago, we sat down with these people and asked the questions. What are going to be the challenges of bringing African beef into the European table? We've been working with these guys all the way through. Just picking up on the culture point there, the lady with the hat, the reason she wears a hat like that is because it's cow horns. Their national dress has cow horn hats. They're so entrenched with beef. We actually have a sustainable beef roundtable that met 3 weeks ago in Johannesburg for the first time. We've actually started. We're starting talking about the issues that matter to Africa. We have European retailer support now from 3 companies. We're starting to supply 3 European retailers, and we'll be looking for US support sooner or later. But obviously we're not going to be invading with huge volumes of beef. What we would like to do is to prove that Africa can be a safe and a responsible beef producer in the future, and to be safe and responsible, we've addressed the phytosanitary issues, we need to think about responsible production. For us, farmers and the livelihood improvement is really, really important. We've looked at staff welfare and treatment for our workers in our meat plants. There's a community trickle-down of benefits. The environment is a big one for us. We have one of the largest cheetah populations in the world, which can coexist with cattle, believe it or not. It's a challenge, but it can happen. We have a not-for-profit foundation now, reaching out to communities, making sure that profits are evenly distributed. And we're starting to attract donor partners now in an aid-for-trade relationship. We've sat down and we've done our cooperation with our stakeholders I mentioned. We've done an independent study of our livelihoods. How much are the farmers earning? How much are the small farmers earning from cattle? How important are cattle for these small farmers? If we're going to move the agenda forward, it has to pay for the small guys. You can't just ask them to do stuff because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't work. This is our biggest challenge. This is media hype of the problem. Africa is not one country, there's 57 countries in Africa. It's not all drought-stricken, and not everybody's hungry. This was from the Guardian newspaper in 2009, and it said that the streets of Nairobi were covered in cows. Now, I go in and out of Nairobi on a fairly regular basis, and if there's a cow on the road, it's because it fell off a lorry. There are not cows on the streets of Nairobi. But this was a newspaper journalist who wrote a story about drought in Africa, this single country. And we need to control this kind of stuff, because this is the kind of stuff which will put barriers up, and we need to break these barriers down. This is an interesting ethical brand extension. This is the Danish co-op who are selling Namibian beef, labelled as Namibian beef. That is a sticker that says, lend a hand to Africa. It's not claiming it's sustainable, it's not claiming that it's ethical, it's not claiming it's fair trade. It's just saying if you buy this beef, you're supporting African farmers and they can support their families. And this is getting good resonance now in Denmark, and I applaud the Danish co-op for their courage in putting that out there. And I think it does show that there is a consumer model there if we want to do it. 2 similar models there, 2 German retailers running Namibian beef. So the message is we have actually got African beef on European shelves. Just to note there, Bos Taurus in Namibia, Boston. So that's quite an interesting one. And I would encourage folks to look at the website natures-reserve.co.uk. We have our 5 little videos on there, a little bit like you saw earlier. And I think I'm just in my 10 minutes. Thank you.